I'm going to invite our next panel to the stage. And if you'd like to shuffle the four chairs onto the stage as well. And just while our next panel's coming onto the stage, I'd like to invite all of you to stand up. Look at that, look at that. And turn round to the person behind you and give them a good afternoon, a hello, a handshake, whatever you feel most comfortable with. And then turn back to me. And let's all stretch up into the air, stretch high, stretch out to the left, yeah, and stretch out to the right. And when you're feeling comfortable again, shake yourself a little bit and sit down, sit yourselves down, and then we'll get comfortable for the afternoon session. And we've got a wonderful, wonderful forum of school leaders. I wonder what the collective noun is for school leaders. Let's not go there. We've got Marilyn George. Marilyn, most welcome to you. I think many people will know Marilyn. Marilyn's from the University of California, Doctor, Executive Vice President of the accreditation agency at WASC. So warm welcome to you. And we've also, We've also got Dr. Michael, who's Deputy Head of Harrow International School in Bangkok. 5 years, is it now?
5 years.
5 years indeed. And also has a niche in understanding and not quite practicing, but studying Japanese law, which is quite remarkable. And also as well, who's next? We've got Debbie. Debbie, welcome. Debbie's the Deputy Head of the ISB School. And also, what areas would your specialisms be in? Curriculum, pastoral, or? Curriculum, instruction, and also Deputy Head, anything else that comes through the door that you need to pick up as well. And, how long have you been with the ISB? Wow, fantastic, fantastic. But 25 years altogether in international education. Wow, amazing. Where were you previously?
Forget about these. I spent a year in Quito, Ecuador before I went back to the US for a few years. And then I ended up here in Thailand, and I'm so fortunate to be here.
Fantastic, welcome. And of course, needs no introduction, our very own Dr. James. How are you? With your own fan club on the front row, Dr. James. Previously you were in Singapore, is that correct?
Yeah, 17 years in Singapore, and then 3 years in Switzerland, and 6th year here.
Wow, amazing, amazing, absolutely amazing. So all of you for me are my heroes in different ways, really, when I think about the schools you lead and the service that you've given to children as well, and also the service you've given to educational professionals. So we've got about an hour and a quarter, and we have some pre-prepared questions that I'm going to try and... What? No. Oh, no, everyone knows it. I did introduce myself. So I get to do this bit so I don't have to answer the questions, because some of them I looked at and I thought, oh, how do you really say that well? So I feel like I've got the easiest job. But we're going to just do some pre-prepared questions. And then if there's any other questions you'd like to build on, we've got plenty of time to do that too as well, and try and help share all of our experiences together. So the first kind of section we thought about was how school leaders build capacity. So when we're thinking about building capacity, it's how do we identify the knowledge we need? How do we develop people's understanding and share that knowledge? And how do we actually support the skills that people need to be able to demonstrate in the systems that we create? And so this is a really broad question now. So how does an international school build a culture that supports professional growth and development of its faculty? So really broad, that thing about culture, isn't it? So what are the things we actually do to get that kind of warmth and the sweet spot between challenge and support, that our teachers want to stay with us, carry on learning to do the best they can. So who'd like to try and tackle that one first?
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody. I'm really glad you started with that question, because to me, culture is the most important thing of all. I think we can have the best possible systems, but if we don't have the right culture, if we don't have the right set of values and beliefs, then it's never, ever going to work. So I know there's got to be lots of different ways to answer this. So one way, I think, to me, it's about the vision of the school. And I think this was mentioned in our last presentation as well. The idea that your institution has a very clear shared vision and shared set of values, I think, has to be the starting point. So, that all the colleagues within the school need to feel as if they have a voice, first of all, in creating that vision. And they own it, they share it, they understand why they're doing what they're doing. We've all read Simon Sinek, haven't we? So the idea that everyone in the team understands why, they understand what the school is about, the purpose, as you put it, the mission. I think that's absolutely critical. And then after that, it's about trust and transparency, I think, as the starting points for developing that kind of culture. I think that's the bedrock.
Yeah, I'll build on that. And I think you're exactly right. It's about culture, but it's the actions that you put in place that build that culture. And I think you're spot on. It's about the vision, everybody having that clear understanding. But when you think about the leadership actions that you have to take, it's about being a leader who is visibly a learner. How do I, as a leader, share what I'm reading? How do I share my knowledge? How am I providing the resources of time, access, money, opportunity for teachers to learn? How am I putting the systems in place in order to support that ongoing growth? And I think you also mentioned, Michael, that idea of, how do you find the sweet spot? And as a school, we've been doing a book study. Again, how do we build that culture? We're doing book studies. As a community, we've got our parents involved, we've got our teachers involved, we've got admin involved. And one of the books we're working on right now, it's called 10 to 25. And it brings out that principle of the idea that high expectations are fostered by high levels of support within. And so that's how we're also approaching that with our educators, is saying, look, we have really high expectations for what you're able to do for our learners, but we're also going to give you high supports. And so those are some of those things that I mentioned underneath there, that those systems we put into place to encourage people to learn, to take chances, to encourage people to go out and bring back new ideas and try things and make sure that we're giving people opportunities to take risks and fail forward. It's really okay. Yeah, it didn't work this time. Yeah, okay, let's see. What did we learn from that, and how can we get better the next time?
Right. So to build off that a little bit as well, and certainly to think about if it's about alignment toward purpose, and then accelerating and being an accelerant as a leader in the school, which is our purpose, is to amplify others. I think one of the points you made, Chris, was around the capacity building around professional development and professional growth. I think one of the things that we need to do as a leadership team as well is to frame that getting better as a professional is not the goal of professional learning. It's to have the impact on improving student learning and wellness. And I think that's something that we forget sometimes, or we take it as a proxy, as a given. Well, I did the professional training, therefore we're done. But we're not. We did the professional learning. The next step is to apply those skills, apply those knowledge, have a measurable outcome, and see, did what we learned make a difference? Did it move the dial? Did it make a difference in terms of student learning and student well-being? And I think to keep coming back to that as a leader, we're doing this to improve learning for students. It has to be the mantra of the purpose of professional growth and development that is accelerated through leadership, but also aligned with purpose as well, so that we're going in the same direction.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I have this constant challenge around this word accountability. That I want to hold myself accountable and I want my staff to be accountable. And yet, how do I make it light enough that they have room to grow? And I heard you say the fail forward. And I don't know if you share that dilemma as a leader. How do you hold everyone accountable, but in a gentle way? And how do you do it well? What are the things you actually do?
think one of the keys with accountability is clarity. Is if you're really clear with your faculty and staff about what is it that we're expecting, what is it that we're hoping to take from it, what is the learning outcome that we're striving toward, that helps make it a little bit easier to take risks, as you say, and you know, maintain that balance between accountability and risk and growth, right? Because growing is awkward and it's hard and it's not always, doesn't always happen the way you anticipate it happening. And so I think it's that clarity about what is our end goal, what is our purpose, what is our why.
I completely agree with that. To be clear is to be kind, isn't it? Right, Brad. The other thing that we've been working on quite a lot recently to try to find that sweet spot is to focus on accountability systems which are fundamentally developmental. So we've created a new leadership framework, for example, and we're working on new teaching standards. And the way that we've constructed those is around questions which always begin with, to what extent are you self-improving in this particular moment? To what extent are you able to deliver these kind of key assessing questions? And we're trying to get across to colleagues that it's not this kind of like black and white game where, you know, you've got enough or you're not good enough. It's about all of us constantly being on this journey of development and constant improvement. And people just feel safer with it. And they feel invested in rather than measured and weighed. And I think that really helps.
And I think there's an opportunity here as well to talk about learning, right? So I think what a great question to ask colleagues. What does it look like and what does it feel like when kids are learning? It feels awkward, it feels difficult, right? I'm in that Vygotsky zone of proximal development. I'm not doing the same things I'm always doing, but I'm not going so far that I'm feeling unsafe. So finding that sweet spot is where we want our students to be situated. And I think that also applies for us as professional learners as well, right? So if it feels a little awkward, that's probably about right. And I think that's a nice way to frame learning and for us to feel safe around that. And I'm thinking about like Dylan Williams, you know, constant saying, we should all assume that we should be wanting to grow and get better as teachers because that helps our students get better as learners. And I think that's a nice way to frame it, is that assumption that let's just start that we're all here to get better as professional educators. And I always remind people, are there any amateur educators in the room? No, we're all professionals. And by definition, we have our own responsibility to improve and grow as professionals.
And what I hear in all your answer is talking, modeling, reassuring, and it's this thing about adults, and adults constantly need time and opportunity to construct their meaning, and yet finding the time and opportunity when you've got a timetable to run. and the PTA complaint that's arriving, I noticed it on the school development plan you put up, and all those other things actually is the kind of the daily challenge, isn't it? So to keep the purpose really, really clear for what you're about. And Dr. Marilyn, I just wondered, having seen so many schools and thought about this deeply through your career, what do you think is the role of the head of school here in creating the collaborative culture in which teachers and middle leaders grow?
You know, I think it's exactly what we heard here. And I'd just like to back that up with one of our standards, and it's called school leadership. And if my voice holds up, I'll read it or I'll have Deb read it. The school leadership makes decisions to facilitate actions that focus the energies of the school on students' achievement of identified outcomes. So as what we heard, it's all about student learning and well-being. But notice the next point, empower staff. Aha, I want to dwell on that a minute. And encourages commitment, participation, and shared accountability for student learning and well-being. Now I could go on, but I want to comment. When I did my study quite a few years ago, I looked at adult learning styles. And one of the key things is we as adults don't want to be told what to do. We want to be involved and experience what we're passionate about. So one of the things as a key leader is have I selected a faculty, but how can I groom and keep building that so that we are all totally committed to student learning? You may not be my best friend on the staff, but we are committed as a whole school community to quality learning and well-being. And what do we do to build that? And that we are part of the ownership. In Margaret's presentation, there's a slide which I feel strongly about as we developed our guiding principles. The action plan that a school has, whatever you call it, is owned by everyone. Yes, even the brand new teacher that just arrived at your school, they're part of it. They may not have the deeper level, but I've said to young teachers, yes, you're worried about what you're doing every day with the students in the class, but likewise, you have a family here, and you're part of the whole school, led by teacher leaders and administrators, all working together. We're all committed together to work together. And I think I want to pick up on the point. This really dates me. There was a book, copyright 1985. Maybe some of you read it. Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot. The title was The Good School. And her note was, there is no perfect school. The sign of a good school is exactly what we've heard this afternoon from everyone. It's that journey. It's ongoing, continuous improvement. And it's okay we make mistakes, but we're going to move forward, always focusing on learning and well-being. In my experience with accreditation, I had, and I'm nameless, a head of the school says, all you ever do is talk about student learning. And I said, that's right, and that's not going to change. That's what we're all about. And we have to then keep that in mind as we differentiate, because as we're working with each and every student at the school. So to me, this is a constant challenge and journey. And how do I, as leadership, keep the momentum going, knowing things we've got to change, yet what do we do knowing my culture? The culture at each of your schools is very different if I spent time there. How do I address that? When Dr. Groves and I just updated our book, Connecting the Dots, I dwelt more on when you have a new young leader, here's the cynical side. Oh, we have to get accredited. Tick it off. Margaret, you're a good writer. You handle it. Wrong. How do I build those tools into my toolkit as a leader to build processes at the school to support quality learning and well-being? And accreditation is one. There are other tools. So it's key, but each of these leaders have to get to know their school, their faculty, their people, and within that, brand new teachers, there's one level of challenge. Veteran teachers, believe me, I know that. There's another challenge as I visit many schools. And how many times have Margaret and I had on a visit? If it ain't broke, Marilyn, we're not going to fix it. Well, I think we want to think about that. So that, in a nutshell, I could quote criterion after criterion or standard that gets at this idea, but I just picked a few key points, Chris.
And I love the way that we started off with kind of leaders thinking about vision. We've got to some practices. Let's share some books. Let's do the modeling. Let's think about the structured learning. And also I love the fact that what you've been able to explain there, the standards in themselves build capacity. You can't actually stand away from this because the children are always changing. The staff are changing as they're coming through. So the standards in themselves are kind of constantly pushing us to keep responding to what's in front of us. And that helps me move on to this next question now, that we've talked about the staff that we have and how we make sure they've got the knowledge and skills. What are the other components of your communities that are important to you, and why have they become important to you in this journey of school improvement?
Well, the obvious, most important community is your students, right? I mean, they're the ones always at the center of everything you do. And your parents come around that, and your teachers and your administrators and your support, everyone wraps around. And so I think when you're talking about community, it really depends on where you're coming from and what your purpose is around the discussion. One of the most important elements of bringing your community involvement in is having a conversation about the learning. It's not just about, Debbie didn't have such a great day in school. It's not always about the behavioral side. It's about the learning side of it. We've talked a lot about the data. Parents and students need to be engaged with the data. The students need to be owning their learning. They need to be owning their steps forward. And when we're talking again, when you talk about community, that to me brings that idea of we are all in this together in order to make sure that every student in the seats in our schools are getting the absolute best experience and absolutely learning the most that they possibly can. And so it's what is your mindset around that, and who do you bring to the table, and what is the conversation, and how are you listening? And I mean really listening, not just, as you said, sort of ticking the boxes. We have these parent meetings, but it's how are we listening and understanding what is our learners' experience every day? What is it like being a kindergartner from the time you get to school until you finish at 5 o'clock with all of your after-school activities and things like that? And so when you talk about community, that's your absolute best source of data as well. John talked a lot about data. He talked about how do you analyze that and make decisions about it. Data is only as good as the action you take based on it. And who are your best sources of data? Absolutely your learners and your parents, for sure.
Around community, it's interesting. We were thinking about obviously the role of parents. That's the obvious one, and looking at the research around probably the teachers we know from research have the biggest positive impact on student learning. And in that mix is parents, right? Like the parent community matters, especially around expectations and involvement. So ignoring them really allows, we're missing a component, we're missing a variable that's potentially powerful around supporting learning for students. Chris asked that we keep it practical. So I guess one practical suggestion that I would make to schools is to map out your community, map out your partners in terms of who are all those players that are involved in your school. And it's interesting because once we start that activity, the obvious ones with the students and the teachers and the parents and the neighbors and the accreditation agencies and the support networks and the partners and the embassies and you can quickly get a lot of people involved and that's an important activity for us to do because we recognize who's in our community. We recognize all of those influences within the bigger equation and who those variables are and what roles they play, because we want to obviously accelerate the roles so they can have the biggest impact. And also draw some barriers around things, right? Your role as a parent is not to be in the classroom, right? And here's the reason why. And to be able to be clear about those expectations and the partnerships and where they begin and where they end is an important part of visible communication and drawing boundaries around that as well.
Yeah, just to back that up, I think that kind of communication, it really rests on relationships. And I think you're going to get the best quality communication from your parents in particular if you have built a very, very strong relationship with them. And you can do that in so many different ways. I think it's really, really important that any conversation you have about little Johnny, who's not done quite as well as he should be doing, is never, ever the first conversation that you've ever had with that parent. There's always going to be multiple other touch points through which you build that relationship and you build that trust, and you get the parents to understand that they are an integral part of the team around that child. I think that's a really essential part in it. So it's a lot of sort of quite structured and targeted events. So parent workshops on key things that parents need to know, but it's a lot of soft things. I think it's getting parents into school for various good reasons and positive reasons, and student expos and tea mornings and things like that. And you use those, they're not just social occasions, they're really important occasions for relationship building. So you make sure you've got all your pastoral leaders out there and they're picking off the parents that they know actually they need to just build that strengthen that relationship with, because they know there's going to be an issue there. But I think that's another sort of practical way forward.
I just want to say one thing, kind of building on what James mentioned a minute ago, is that idea of mapping out all of the different aspects of your community. And I think what we're seeing, even just this afternoon, in talking about AI and talking about your office assistant, it's that idea that our communities need to expand to include expertise that we don't have as educators anymore. And I think sometimes as educators, we think we know it all, and we are the be all and end all in our school. But we're also recognizing, as quickly as things are changing, that our communities and the outreach and the partners that we need to bring in have to expand. And that's a little bit difficult for us sometimes to do, but it's really an essential part in where we are going next in this life of preparing learners for what comes next.
Dr. Marilyn, I wonder if I can draw you in, and somebody who comes in and looks objectively, or a little bit more objectively, at our organisations and what you've observed about the quality of community engagement in schools that are improving well.
I think overall you really want to look at, sometimes I say it's an intuitive feeling. Is it really open? And do they really value each and every family and student and honor cultural differences? And are they really working on embracing the whole community? And now that varies school by school by school, but that's key. I was just going to note one of our standards that said, how effectively does the school demonstrate mutual respect, caring, and concern for students, faculty, parents, caregivers, and the community that honors individual and cultural differences? So that sounds like a broad statement, but when we go to a school, we spend quality time interacting with a variety of people, talking to students, parents, community members, parents, and we want to get a sense of what's happening as each and every family is honored. And I find that's the challenge at times, because schools may say, yes, we're doing this, yet we find in reality, it's really focusing on one population without another. So I think this is something we train our teams. Every culture is different. And, those of you that have been on a team know, you don't go in and say, well, at my school, no. You want to get to know that school and what is the culture. Michael Fullen is one of my gurus. And I remember in 2016, he wrote a book called Coherence Making. And he broke down how important that sense of community with a focused direction and building, of course, the collaborative culture. And that depends on external and internal accountability. So that's where, as an accreditation team coming in, we're giving reflections, but trying to understand the school. I find this is an area that is very challenging in every different situation. And with the political dynamics that's going on throughout the world right now, this is one that we have to be very careful that we have teams coming in open totally, but working on a total school community and reaching out to broader than that. This is a major challenge area.
I agree with that. And actually, there's just some universal principles that as human beings, regardless of where we come from or what we carry in life, we can still hold dear. So I know that the accreditation agencies, and WASC in particular, do that extraordinarily well. If we just step a little bit more into that, Marilyn, if I may, you're the chair of the Child Protection Committee.
Right.
And I was before I asked this question, I wondered if you could straighten out a few things for us, because when we're working cross-culturally, we can confuse several things. We can confuse safeguarding we can confuse the term child protection, and they can become interchangeable, and maybe we're talking about different things. So I wondered if you could maybe explore that for us a little bit. Maybe just tell us about your role as the chair in that committee, and then what principles you're looking for in schools.
Well, CIS formed a task force quite a few years ago in 2015-16, and Dr. Fred Van Leuven was first on the committee. Then Rick Spradling from CIS and I were co-chairs on the assessment committee, because all the worldwide accrediting agencies were invited to particularly be part of that subcommittee. So what we developed, getting input from a variety of agencies, what were policies, procedures, and practices that we all should abide on. Now, every accrediting agency, and some were not, let's say worldwide, just working in one country or another, agreed to these practices. But what I think the beauty of this task force was the fact that each agency took those big ideas and integrated them appropriately into their standards. For example, I'll give you one example of WASC. WASC looked at governance and created a very firm child protection safeguarding statement for that. Leadership, staffing. We looked at security, safety, finances. We looked at curriculum, social support, and then we had a specific culture and environment standard on child protection, but woven throughout. Because, Chris, what I would add, I worked on another committee under the Office of Overseas Schools with the Castle group. And what we found is you can't separate from child safeguarding.
Dr. Marilyn, sorry, I wonder, it's either your speaker or...
Is it off?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Hold there. That's perfect. Right there.
Child safeguarding and social emotional, you can't separate the two. When we worked on this next project on suggesting curricular guidelines for schools, as we all worked worldwide under the Office of Overseas Schools, we realized child safeguarding, child protection, social emotional, you can't separate it all. So it all overlaps. So that's why we felt it was important to weave it throughout all our standards and processes, because you're always aware of it. It might be as simple as a bullying issue, but it could be not honoring cultural differences. It could be not dealing with each and every child, so that we see it all running together. And we're now working on another project. As you know, the federal government is not operating right now in the United States, so we're a little bit on hold. We're working with other accrediting bodies on recognition of special needs children that would update perhaps our social emotional learning, which is going to impact child safeguarding. So you see where I'm going. It's sort of a holistic thing. Margaret, I don't know if you want to comment anymore because my voice is going.
So we'll give Dr. Marilyn just a short break. Would you like to say anything to that? No. So the task force, of course, I think was 2014 in response to the
started in 14 and we finished right before COVID. Our last meeting was in Cambridge, 2019, and then Jane and Colin Bell and others pulled that together as we sort of made sure we all agreed on the policies, procedures, and practices. And then we actually signed an agreement as a worldwide accrediting body that we would update our standards. So do the other agencies, CIS, New England, for example, and Cognia was, you may not be familiar with Cognia, but this is where we found that was helpful, but gave us flexibility, Chris, within how we're approaching it.
A great piece of work, and my understanding in response to the Vahi case, somebody who'd been through a number of CIS schools, and Jane quite went through that process herself again. How could this happen in worldwide, and for the accreditation agencies to come together, working across so many different jurisdictions, and to agree a common set of protocols that we could try to hold ourselves to, I think was a really courageous piece of work. And the last iteration of that, 2024, is now fully published.
That's right.
And the detail of it dries more deeply for us now as well. So to give you a break just for a moment, Dr. Marilyn, I wonder, leaders of several schools and as heads of schools and deputy heads of schools, when we step in, our attention is on safeguarding. What are some of the common things that you noticed in your tenures in different schools that most likely come up that you turn your hand to? And maybe there's not an answer to that, but what are the things that most often come up when you're thinking about making sure processes and systems are as you want them as you lead your schools in terms of safeguarding child protection?
So I'll start off with one of probably many, which is probably one of the biggest concerns right now around seeking references when hiring. And I think this is a continued issue. And I mean, it's become a bit of a party trick at some international conferences where we would say to heads of school, how many of you call for a reference when and everybody's hand goes up? Thank you. How many of you receive calls and no one's hand goes up? So obviously there's a problem there somewhere where we all think we're doing it, but no one's getting the call. And I think this has got to be something that we acknowledge and that we hold ourselves accountable to, that we need to be doing, first of all, written and then verbal reference checks as well as we move around the world and as we're hiring people that are moving around the world as well.
Sort of another dimension to that, but is the student references. So when it comes to taking good care of our students, we need to know their full pastoral and safeguarding history. And I don't know about you guys, but one of the massive challenges we have is that we just can't get that information. So we have students joining us from a number of different countries, and it's a huge challenge. And we have systems, and we follow up, and we multiple phone calls, but it's very, very hard to get that information. So every year we'll have a number of students who will join us who've got some really significant safeguarding needs. Obviously we look after them, but we're on the back foot. So I think that's something collectively that we also really need to work on.
And I would say another area that we're really, and I think we all are dealing with, is for our students is social media, and the impact that has on learners, not only the social emotional, just the devastating effects that cyberbullying, all of those things that go into social media present. It's a dangerous place out there in the ether. And I think a couple of years right before I came here, and I used to work with the Internet Task Force for Child Protection, and the things that happen online that parents aren't aware of and things like that. And so I think that's another side of this, is we have to do our due diligence in hiring and making sure that the people around our children are safe. But how are we also supporting parents in supporting and making sure that their children are safe in this space that a lot of parents don't necessarily understand? So when you talk about child safeguarding and child protection, I think that's a big area that we really need to be supportive of, because it's there.
And just to build upon that, it's a good segue. We're finding the biggest challenge when we do an accreditation visit, and I think the other agencies, is the school up to date on its safeguarding policies? Is there ongoing regular training? And one unique area is, if people come on campus to do a special project, schools often forget to vet those, and that could create a major issue. So that ongoing training, support, and do not assuming, as well as I've heard from so many heads as we've been, that the issue of checking for references, as you said, James. But this is something that we have regular, and also thinking through practical details, we find some schools say, well, we have boarding, we're fine, and they don't think through the details. So we've had to provide additional support references like on ICMAC, and that they need guidance more on what to do. And we will come back and check. Just last spring, I had a team at a school where the residential life program was very, very challenging. And they had a warning. And I think the best thing that happened there, the school shut the residential life down because that was the safest thing, because there was no way we were going to be able to move forward in that situation. So we're constantly on alert, and the team's very much alert, but it is something that really impacts the entire school.
On a kind of positive note on this, I think safeguarding is the one thing which absolutely every school should be putting number one, and that there's never any barrier to collaborating and working together. And I think that that's something which is enormously important in the international context. So in the UK, there'd be various government agencies where if you're dealing with a child who's reached a certain threshold, CAMS would eventually step in, and they would take care of it, and they would navigate through various hospitals and whatever. Obviously, that doesn't always exist in all contexts. So a lovely example recently, we got all the Bangkok DSLs together, and they've done a lot of work with local hospitals to draw up some frameworks so that if we've got a child who's sort of in acute distress and we need proper professional diagnosis, then we've got a framework now that a number of schools have agreed with. We've worked with the hospitals to develop this. So when we send the child in, there's a set of questions which have been clearly articulated. There's information which is clearly articulated. So the medical professionals and mental health professionals in the hospital are able to support the child and support the school more effectively. So I think there are lots of things that we can all do in that kind of vein as well.
And I think what you're demonstrating live is just the capacity building bit all the time. And to your point, Dr. Marilyn, when you were talking about how do we check schools haven't just stalled and they're going back and looking at how things are changing and updating their policies, is also built into your standards as well, isn't it? For safeguarding as well. How are you continuing to do this? So we've got a final section, which is the 100 or so years of experience, which you see, not invested in any one person, but shared equally amongst our noble guests. They will finish off with some top tips, okay? But before they do that, I'd like to give you the chance to ask any questions. And so I'm just going to give you a few moments. And you had your hand up first, so we'll come to you in a minute. But I'm just going to give you a few moments. We've talked about how do you create capacity in a way that assures accountability, development of skills, and psychological safety of teachers. And you've heard that here. We've talked about safeguarding, and we've also talked about community engagement. So you might have a specific question in each of those areas, or you might have a random question, how to make the best pad thai, I don't know. But you can ask that too. But maybe just think for a moment, are there any questions you'd like to ask in those three buckets, or is there something else? And I'll just give you a moment to think through or chat to each other, and then we'll come to some people in the room. Each one of you needs to tell one key strategy or policy area that you devise people to focus on to drive excellence in their school. Okay, so we've got about 7 or 8 minutes for some questions. Generally, or would you like to direct it at somebody?
Hi, good afternoon. I don't like having my back to people, so I'm going to come over here. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dr. J.C. Wagner Romero, head of school at Centurion. So one of the things, you had my wheels turning a lot. Also, shameless plug, if you're a member of ISAT, I'm leading a workshop at the end of this month. Sign up for it and come collaborate with me. But that is the spirit that I'm asking this question in, is we talk a lot about collaboration and coming together and making sure that that spirit drives how we run our schools. How do you recommend that we undo some of the spirit of uncollaboration that happens specifically within Thailand, more specifically within Bangkok international schools, right? So I'll give you a specific example. I was the deputy head of a smaller school here 10 years ago. Then I went back to the US to marry this beautiful human who now moved back with me to be head of school here. And we both lead a very small school, right? So how is it that we take all of the wonderful things that you're saying and apply that to a small school? So a perfect example is I'm big on professional development. I was vice president of New Orleans Public Schools. It's what I did. However, since being here, it's been so hard to access school leaders that are wanting to collaborate, that will let my teachers who have little experience go into their schools and observe best practices so that we can create a better Thailand together, right? So my specific question is, how do we undo that culture, right? To ensure that school leaders across the city sort of drive education with the same spirit that we all want.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chris. I'll start with that. First of all, great question, because I mean, we're dealing in one of the most saturated markets of international schools in the world. So acknowledging that and that it's a competitive market also says yes. So, I mean, that's a barrier to begin with. So the only way I think to contrast that is on the moral side of, we know that working together, that we create better synergy and we create better gains. So the question then becomes, how do we work together to honor the fact that we may be competing for the same market, but at the same time also elevating education across all of Thailand, I think, as you said as well. So part of it is finding your network, and that's hard, right? So, but organizations like ISAT, organizations where we can bring schools together to be able to say, of all the schools that are out there, who might be dealing with some of the things that we're working with that would like to work together? And the nice thing is, you only need 2 or 3 partners to work together to create that long-lasting synergy. You don't need the 210 schools all together necessarily as well. So I think that would be the first thing, which I know you're already involved in, like in terms of looking for that network of people that are willing to work together. So that would be something certainly that we've talked about, like in terms of helping support those partnerships as a first step.
Well, I'm not sure if, first of all, I'm president of ISAT for more than 20 years, 26 years, 27 years, something like that. But we collaboratively work together in the spirit of international school educators and administrators and all of that. And we have very good network. We have what we call protocol that we work together so well. And, if small size school, medium size school, or big size school, we all have the same spirit that we come together. Inside your mind, you probably say, hey, I'm your rival school or something like that. When we work together at ISAT school, we leave that outside. And we just, try to support each other in any question. We always get a question from, the small school in the south, small school in Chonburi or something like that coming in. Why we have some problem getting visas, some work permit or something like that, So I said, okay, who do you talk to? And how are we going to help you solve the problem? Something like that. And we work together collaboratively. We enjoy working together. And the beauty of ISAT is that the voice of internet school, we are the unified voice of internet school in Thailand. And I can tell you, I'm proudly say that right now, ISAT has been very well recognized as a professional education organization in Thailand. And we support the quality education in Thailand. That's who we are. So if you're not a member of ISAT, consider.
To wrestle this off, Yeah, I would think as well, to get good collaboration, first of all, you need a forum. Then you need the right people turning up at the forum. And then you need to teach the skills how to collaborate. And so for me, collaborations is quite a diagnostic thing to go through. Have we got a forum? Have we got the right people at the table? And how do we then demonstrate, model, and teach the skills of it? And it takes time. I would say my experience of Bangkok is it's more collaborative than Hong Kong, where there's only 52 international schools, nowhere near the kind of the sharkery that goes on from my experience. And also much more collaborative than my time working in the state system in the UK, which was built on collaboration. So keep banging on doors would be my thing. And who can resist that performance? Just like, you're after my job, come on. Right, any more questions?
I'm going to stay seated. I hope that's okay. First of all, I really want to thank you because all the advice and suggestions that you've given have really helped sort of confirm we're a very young school. We're going into our 9th year. So really helped confirm that our trajectory on our particular journey is headed in the right direction. So thank you so much for that. I have a question about community. And we talked a lot about the importance of the different stakeholders. And one of the challenges we have with one of our stakeholders are the parents. And you mentioned about the boundaries that are important, but also collaborating with the parents. And having that balance, we still struggle striking that balance. So if you could give us some advice on how to do that, we'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, we've been doing this a long time, and we still don't always get it right. I mean, it depends on who are your parents, what are their needs, what are you communicating with them, how are you establishing enough transparency that they feel that they're informed and understand, but yet you're not, giving them more than they really need. You have to be moderate about that. But I know earlier Michael was talking about relationships. It's that idea, you build relationships one conversation at a time, and that's where it starts. Because when you have to then go out and post things out in the courtyard of your first grade quadrangle, you're saying, parents, you're not supposed to be here during learning times. They understand why that is, or they have a relationship with someone they can go and ask. And so, yeah, it's a tricky thing, right? Because different parents have different needs for what they need to know about their learner, what they need to hear, and what they want to tell you as the educator of their child. Because let's face it, this is the most precious possession that they have. They hold this more dear than anything else. And so, yeah, it changes with every family, with every year that child grows, right? So, there is no perfect answer. Sorry.
I completely back up what Debbie says. It's something that we try really, really hard at, and we definitely don't get right all the time. So we've got a real issue at the moment with students wanting to take pictures of their children all the time, and trying to educate the parents, get them to understand why that's a bad thing, understand what the potential dangers are. It's a journey. It's ongoing. But what I would say is just stay strong, because if you, like Gabby was saying, you're building those relationships, you're communicating your values, you're communicating what you are as a school, what you stand for, what you're delivering to these families, and you stay true to that. And that's what actually builds the project.
Yeah. I think it's such a good question as well, because it's an emotional feeling that parents have, and giving them a rational response isn't going to connect the two. So telling a story, though, about why we need you to act in a certain way to benefit your children might help. And then giving a personal story as well. So one example would be, here's the things we need you to do for these reasons. We need you to, speak positively about the power of education in schools. Speak honorably about educators and what they're trying to achieve, even if we don't get it right all the time. Here's the things we don't want you to do. We don't want you to be in your children's learning space, because as soon as you go into the space, you affect the experiment. Here's a personal story as an example. As a head of school, I've had 2 children go through school. You know the number of times that I've been in my children's classroom? 0. You know why? Because as soon as I step in the classroom, their learning changes. And I trust the teachers, and I want the teachers to do their job, so I stay out of their space. I have every reason that I could be in there, and I specifically don't because I value their learning more than my needs. That's an example of a story that you would tell a parent as to why.
Are there some further questions? Maybe if I go a little bit further back, would anybody else like to ask anything?
Thank you. I just want to hear from you, Mr. Sammons, because my granddaughter goes to his school and she loves the school and she loves you. So please, you can tell us about you. Peppermint.
So Peppermint is the most gorgeous young thing. And when I first arrived in Bangkok, I got asked to go to Emporium, I think. And Peppermint must have been in FS1 at that time and doing her pirouettes. So I just pirouetted with her and made this beautiful relationship ever since. And she came into my office because she's just broken her arm. She's in year 2 now. And she's collecting money for the hospital because when she had to go to the hospital, it wasn't very pleasant, some of the things that she was seeing there for a young child. And so she's turned it into this magical experience of raising money. So thank you for the plug. I really appreciate it. So I think what's important really as school leaders when we come together is we're all going through the same stuff all the time. And what is my eternal frustration is whatever school I'm in, it's still the same stuff and I still haven't mastered it. And that's because we're all human beings together. And there's some need for us all to drop the fences, drop the bravado, and just recognize that we're all vulnerable. And in these moments, just share what we're all here to do, which is just to make the best experiences for children like Peppermint that we possibly can. So thank you for that. But before you go, top tip time. What would be the thing that you would tell this sagacious school of leaders to go back and focus on to make the maximum impact as soon as they could from your experience?
So, I think building on what John presented, what Margaret presented, I think that one of the key, the absolute foundation for continuous improvement is committing to actioning on your data. It's not just admiring it. It's not just looking at it. It's committing to actioning it in a way that moves your learners forward toward achieving your goals. So that would be one of my tips.
Round of applause, please. And thank you so much for all of your sharing today. Thank you. Next.
Gosh, right. If it's just the one. I'm going to go back to the very first thing I said, and that is about clarity of vision. If your team don't understand the why and they don't buy into the why, you're never going to succeed to the level that you can succeed. So if there's one most important thing, that's it for me.
My one thing. Okay, I'm going to pick up on 2 things that Margaret said. The first thing is we look at a 3-year rolling average. And I think 3 years is fast in education. If you can make change in 3 years, that's pretty good. So with that in mind, you also use the golf metaphor as well, that we have a handicap. We don't change the way we handicap every 6 months, right? Because then we can measure our growth over time. As soon as the standards change, as soon as the measurement changes over time, we lose the opportunity for continuity. So I think holding ourselves to the same high standards allows us to have that long-term view of our growth. And then as leaders, we can tell the story of where we were, what we changed, how we acted together, and how we made change for purpose over time. And I think that's important for us to be able to say.
Dr. Marilyn.
Make sure can you hear me?
We can. Here we can.
This is my rough voice. I think we've heard it from the panel very nicely stated. This is an ongoing journey, but never lose fact of your vision. What are you focusing on? And leaders are modeling that continually, day by day, in practical ways, and then also setting the stage, but always pulling together. I think of Michael Fullen's book again, Focusing Direction, and celebrating along the way. James, you said it well. Let's celebrate the little baby steps. We're making progress, but don't just keep switching. What is it, our overall? But it's important as people come and go at our international schools that we don't lose focus of what our overall goals are. Where do we want to be for students? And I will repeat, how well are all students learning? Are we doing everything possible to support that learning and well-being continually as we prepare students? And so that's always, as we wake up each day, why am I here? What is it all about? And modeling that in a day-to-day practical way. We're doing it every day. And that's why sometimes we go to schools and they've got the big overall picture, but I'm saying what's happening every day to address those overall goals for student learning and well-being.
Thank you, Dr. Marilyn. So thank you so much for taking the time. And my last top tip is every morning when you look in the mirror, just remind yourself what an incredible job you do on a daily basis. And there's always 100 more things to do, but the one thing, remind yourself, none of it works without you. So really look after yourselves as well. Now, the next session, I'm not quite sure about, but are people remaining here that want to explore accreditation, Dr. Kittia? Or, and am I meant to be doing that? Or what?
Thank you very much. Actually, on 31st of October, we had a pre-conference at ONESQA. So only people who would like to start your accreditation process, we will discuss with Dr. Marilyn George and Dr. Margaret Alvarez about timelines altogether. But it doesn't mean that if you are none of them, you can't join. No, you can still join to listen, to hear, to get the idea how to start the process for your school. But for the serious one who registered already, now there are 7 schools, if I'm not wrong, then we're gonna discuss as a small groups. Okay, Chris?
Okay. So if you're keen to start the journey of accreditation, if you want to come and pick brains, remain, and then everybody else is free to spend some time at the refreshments bar or whatever you need to do next. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was much easier asking the questions and answering them. Well done. Well done. Thank you.
Before leaving, if you don't want to share this session, could you please do the satisfaction survey so ONESQA will know how to improve our next session, maybe next year. Thank you very much.
Before we end the last session, maybe have the honor of our Deputy Director to present the token of our appreciation to each of the speaker, please. If you can remain, if you can remain on the stage, please. Okay. First, for Dr. Marilyn George from WASC. Dr. Marilyn George, Executive Vice President for Western Association of Schools and Colleges. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Second, may I invite Dr. Margaret Alvarez? Dr. Margaret Alvarez, okay. International Director, Western Association of Schools and Colleges. Thank you for your participation in this session. Next, may I invite Mr. John Cock, please? Our Assistant Director for Academic Services, King Mongkut Institute of Technology, Lat Krabang International Demonstration School, or KMIT. Next, may I invite Dr. Michael Reddish, please, our Deputy Headmaster at Harrow International School. Thank you for your participation today. Next, thank you. Next, may I have Mrs.Debi or Deborah Caskey, our Deputy Head of School at International School, Bangkok. Thank you for your wonderful participation today, ma'am. And okay, thank you. And last and not least, please, Mr. James Dalziel, Head of School at NIST International School. Thank you, sir, for your great participation today. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. And the very most important, our wonderful moderator, Mr. Chris Sammons, please. Mr. Chris Sammons from Bangkok Pattana School. So sorry. Thank you. Thank you for your wonderful moderator today. Thank you.
So good.
All the best bits of Bangkok.
Our picture together. Okay.